Have you ever wondered what it takes for a good person, someone kind, compassionate, and ethical, to commit acts of cruelty, or even become a monster? Imagine someone you admire, someone you trust, slowly transforming into someone unrecognizable. What if I told you this isn't just a rare anomaly, but a pattern woven throughout history and human behavior? Today we're diving into one of the most unsettling and thought-provoking questions about human nature. Why do good people sometimes do bad things by the end of this video? You'll uncover the shocking mechanisms that push ordinary individuals into darkness. More importantly, you'll learn how to recognize and resist these forces, with the final insight being the most crucial and empowering of them all. This journey will take us deep into psychological experiments, historical events, and philosophical reflections, exposing the razor-thin line between good and evil. But this isn't just astery about others. It's a mirror forcing us to look inward and ask, what would Ito in their place? Could I too be swayed by these forces? Stay with me, because what you'll discover today could forever change the way you see the world and yourself. The Lucifer effect is a concept popularized by psychologist Philip Zimbardo, who conducted the infamous Stanford prison experiment. What he revealed was profoundly unsettling. The environment we are placed in, the roles we adopt, and the authority we obey can distort even the most virtuous individuals, turning them into perpetrators of harm. Think about it. History is filled with examples of ordinary people committing extraordinary atrocities: the guards in Nazi concentration camps, the soldiers who carried out ethnic cleansing, the bystanders who stood silent as horror unfolded. These individuals were not born evil. In many cases, they were ordinary people swept up in circumstances that unleash the darkest parts of human nature. Why does this happen? The answer lies in a combination of psychological and social forces that shape human behavior. The power of authority. Psychologist Stanley M.G.'s obedience experiments in the 1960s revealed a killing truth. People will go to extreme lengths, even inflicting pain on others, when instructed by an authority figure. In his study, participants were asked to deliver electric shocks to another person who was actually an actor, pretending to feel pain. Shockingly, most participants continued administering shocks even when they believed they were causing severe harm, simply because they were told to do so. Now, think about your own life. How often do we follow instructions without questioning them, whether from a boss, a leader, or even societal norms? What would you do if someone in a position of power asked you to compromise your morals for these called greater good? The power of dehumanization. Another critical factor is dehumanization. When we strip others of their humanity, labeling them as the enemy, subhuman, or lesser, it becomes far easier to justify acts of cruelty. This tactic has been used time and again in propaganda, war, and even everyday conflicts. It's easier to harm someone when you no longer see them as a person. Now consider the language we use today in social and political discourse. How often do we see entire groups of people reduced to labels or stereotypes? How does this diminish our empathy and create an us versus them mentality? The power of social roles and group dynamics. Dehumanization is only part of the puzzle. Social roles and group dynamics also play a significant role. Zimbardo's Stanford prison experiment vividly demonstrated this. College students were randomly assigned to be either guards or prisoners in a simulated prison environment. Within days, the guards began exhibiting abusive behavior, while the prisoners showed signs of extreme stress and submission. What was most shocking, how quickly the participants lost sight of their individuality and conformed to the roles they were given. This raises a critical question: how much of our identity is shaped by the role society imposes on us? Are we truly free to act as individuals, or are we consciously playing parts dictated by the systems around us? Recognizing the forces at play. These forces, authority, dehumanization, and group dynamics, are not just theoretical. They operate in our daily lives, shaping how we think, act, and perceive others. We see them in workplaces and schools, on social media, even within families. Recognizing them is the first step in resisting them and the tipping point. But what about the exact moment when a good person crosses the line? That moment is often subtle. It begins with small compromises, a decision to stay silent when witnessing injustice, a choice to follow along just this once. Over time, Small choices accumulate, creating a slippery slope that can lead to profound moral failure. Pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever made a choice that went against your values, simply because it felt easier or safer? What were the consequences? As we move forward, we'll explore how to recognize these moments before they spiral out of control. More importantly, we'll uncover how to build resilience against these psychological forces. But first, let's confront a deeper question. Are some people immune to the Lucifer effect, or is it a danger? We all face stay with me, because what comes next will challenge everything you think you know about yourself and human nature. Are some people immune? Let's now confront a question that lingers in many minds. Are some individuals truly immune to the Lucifer effect? The answer, though unsettling, is that none of us are entirely immune. Psychologists have long debated whether personality plays a role in resisting corruption and moral collapse. While certain traits like strong empathy, self-awareness, and moral courage may act as protective factors, the truth is that under the right or perhaps the wrong circumstances, anyone can succumb to these forces. Think of it this way: we all carry within us the potential for both great good and unimaginable harm. This duality is a recurring theme in literature, religion, and philosophy. The renowned Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung described it as the shadow, the darker, often repressed parts of ourselves that we hesitate to acknowledge. Jung believed that to truly understand ourselves, we must confront the shadow and integrate it into our conscious awareness. Have you ever felt a surge of anger or envy, so intense it startled you? Have you ever acted impulsively in the heat of the moment, only to deeply regret it later? These are glimpses of the shadow at work. Left unchecked, this shadow can grow, manifesting in ways that align with the Lucifer effect. But here's the hopeful part. Awareness is our greatest defense. By understanding the psychological mechanisms that lead to moral collapse, we gain the power to resist them, the danger of moral disengagement. Now let's go deeper into how these forces operate in real life, and more importantly, how we can counteract them. One of the most insidious mechanisms at play is something psychologists call moral disengagement, a concept introduced by Albert Bandura. Moral disengagement explains how people rationalize harmful behavior to avoid feelings of guilt or remorse. For example, someone might convince themselves everyone else is doing it. The ends justify the means. These rationalizations create a psychological distance between the individual and their actions, making wrongdoing easier to justify. Consider how this plays out in everyday life. A student cheats on an exam thinking it's just a one-time thing. Manager mistreats employees believing it's necessary to meet company goals. In these moments, moral disengagement allows people to act in ways that contradict their values. The antidote: moral vigilance and empathy. The antidote to this, what some psychologists call moral vigilance, the ability to actively question our actions and their consequences even when it's uncomfortable. Ask yourself, I justifying something that deep down I know is wrong? Another powerful counterforce is empathy. Empathy acts as a shield against dehumanization. When we truly see others as complex, sex-feeling individuals, people with hopes, fears, and dreams, it becomes far more difficult to harm them. This is why storytelling, art, and human connection are so vital. They remind us of our shared humanity and break down the barriers that divide us, the role of leadership in society. But what about the bigger picture? How do we address the systems and structures that perpetuate harm and enable the Lucifer effect on a larger scale? This is where leadership and collective responsibility come into play. History has shown us that charismatic leaders can either elevate or corrupt entire societies. Adolf Hitler manipulated fear and prejudice to justify atrocities. Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. used their influence to inspire resistance against injustice and promote positive change. This brings us to a pivotal question. What kind of leader do we choose to follow? And just as importantly, what kind of influence do we have on those around us? Even if we don't hold traditional positions of authority, we'll have influence within our families, communities, and workplaces. The question is, do we use that influence to promote compassion and fairness? Or do we contribute consciously or unconsciously to harm and division? Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Who are the people you admire? What values do they embody? And just as importantly, What kind of example are you setting for those who look up to you as we examine forces like authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and leadership? It becomes clear that the battle between good and evil is not just external, it's an internal struggle, one that each of us faces daily. But here's the empowering truth: just as circumstances can lead people astray, they can also guide us toward extraordinary acts of kindness, courage, and integrity. The same mechanisms that create monsters can also create heroes. So how do we ensure we stay on the path of good? How do we cultivate the strength to resist the pull of the Lucifer effect when it arises? The answers lie ahead. Recognizing and resisting moral failure in the next section. We'll uncover practical strategies for recognizing and resisting the psychological forces that lead to moral failure. These strategies have been tested by psychologists, spiritual leaders, and/or AR individuals who have faced extraordinary challenges. And remember, the final insight we'll explore is the most transformative of all arealization that could change not only the way you see others but also the way you see yourself. Awareness is not enough to resist the forces that lead us astray. We must first understand a crucial truth: awareness alone is not enough. While recognizing the psychological mechanisms behind the Lucifer effect is a vital step, we need actionable strategies to counteract their influence. Let's explore these strategies, starting with one of the most powerful defenses against moral collapse: the power of moral courage. Moral courage is the ability to stand up for what is right, even in the face of fear, opposition, or personal loss. It's what compels someone to speak out against injustice, protect the vulnerable, or admit a mistake even when it would be easier to stay silent. But moral courage is not something we're born with. It's something we cultivate through deliberate practice and reflection. Think of historical figures like Rosa Parks, whose refusal to give up her seat on a segregated bus ignited a civil rights movement, or consider whistleblowers who expose corruption and wrongdoing, often at great personal cost. These individuals were not immune to fear, but they chose to act despite it. Cultivating moral courage. So how can we develop moral courage in our own lives? 1. Identify your core values. What principles matter most to you? Honesty, compassion, fairness, accountability. Reflect on times when you faced a moral dilemma. Did you act in alignment with your values, or did you compromise them? 2. Mental rehearsal. A practical exercise is to imagine yourself in challenging ethical situations. What would you do if you witnessed bullying at work? How would you respond if pressured to follow an unethical directive? By visualizing these scenarios and rehearsing your response, you strengthen your ability to act decisively when the moment arises. 3. Build a support system. Surround yourself with people who share your values. Strong social connections provide accountability and encouragement, making it easier to resist the pressures of conformity and authority. Recognizing the influence of our environment. But what about when we find ourselves in systems or environments designed to erode our morals? This is where situational awareness becomes critical. Situational awareness means recognizing the subtle cues and dynamics that shape behavior. For example, pay attention to group norms. What is considered acceptable or expected in a given environment? If you notice patterns of exclusion, manipulation, or harm, ask yourself, is this truly right, or have I simply accepted it because everyone else has? The power of small actions. Often we feel powerless in the face of systemic issues, but even small acts of resistance can create a ripple effect. One person's decision to act with integrity can inspire others to do the same. For example, speaking up against unethical workplace practices may seem risky, but it can encourage others to voice their concerns. Choosing kindness and understanding in everyday interactions can challenge the culture of dehumanization that often permeates society. In the end, our choices, however small, shape the world around us, and the question remains: will you choose to be a passive participant in moral failure or an active force for good? Let's also address the critical importance of self-reflection. The philosopher Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Self-reflection allows us to recognize our biases, own our mistakes, and grow from them. It's not about achieving perfection. It's about progress, becoming just a little better, a little more aware each day. Make it a habit to regularly ask yourself questions like, what motivated my actions today? Did I treat others with respect and empathy? Were there moments when I stayed silent when I should have spoken up? Reflecting on these questions trains you to act with greater intention and integrity. But what about the ultimate question? Can the Lucifer effect ever be fully neutralized? While the answer may depend on individual and societal factors, the key lies in fostering what psychologist Philip Zimbardo calls the heroic imagination. This mindset allows ordinary people to perform extraordinary acts in the face of moral challenges. It's the belief that heroism is not reserved for the exceptional few. It's within reach for all of us to cultivate this mindset. Start by looking for opportunity. It is to practice small acts of heroism. This could be standing up for someone, being treated unfairly, volunteering to help those in need, or simply choosing kindness over indifference in your daily interactions. It's also helpful to study the lives of those who have exemplified heroism. Whether from historical figures or modern-day change-makers, their stories remind us that courage and compassion are accessible to all of us. At this point, you may be wondering, what is the most powerful insight of all? What final realization could transform the way we see ourselves in the world? That answer lies in understanding the profound interconnectedness of humanity. The line between good and evil doesn't run between groups or nations, it runs through every human heart, as Alexander Sweeten once wrote. The battle line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man. This realization is both humbling and empowering. It reminds us that we are all capable of both harm and healing. But it also gives us the agency to choose. Every moment offers a new opportunity to act with integrity. Resist the pull of darkness and contribute to a world rooted in compassion and justice. Stay with me, because in the final part we'll dive even deeper into how these ideas can be applied to your life. Together, we'll uncover practical steps to not only resist the Lucifer effect, but also become a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. At this point, we've uncovered the psychological mechanisms that can turn good people toward darkness, authority, moral disengagement, dehumanization, and the influence of group dynamics. We've explored how awareness, moral courage, empathy, and self-reflection serve as defenses against these forces. Now let's focus on what you can do starting today to become not just resilient, but a source of light in challenging circumstances. The first step is to recognize your influence. No matter how small or insignificant your role may seem, you have the power to shape the environment around you. In every interaction, you contribute to the norms and values that guide others. Are you fostering a culture of kindness, fairness, and accountability? Or are you silently allowing harmful behaviors to persist? Consider the story of someone who changed the course of history through seemingly small actions. Oskar Schindler, a German industrialist during World War II, was initially motivated by profit. Yet Schindler used his resources to save the lives of over 1,000,000 Jewish people from the Holocaust. His story is a testament to how a single individual, even amid one of history's darkest chapters, can make a profound difference. You don't need extraordinary circumstances to follow this example. You can start in your own community, workplace, or even within your family. Speak up when you see injustice. Offer support to someone who feels isolated. Challenge stereotypes and assumptions that divide people. These small acts, when multiplied, have the power to transform not only individual lives, but entire communities. Another vital step is to educate yourself and others. Knowledge is one of the most effective tools against manipulation and moral erosion. Study history, psychology, and philosophy to deepen your understanding of how and why people make the choices they do. Share this knowledge with others, not to preach or lecture, but to spark meaningful conversations that inspire reflection and growth. For example, have you ever considered how much the stories we consume influence our thinking? Films, books, and media often shape our perceptions of good and evil, right and wrong. By seeking out narratives that challenge your assumptions and broaden your perspective, you build a more nuanced and compassionate understanding of the world. Let's also talk about resilience in the face of pressure. Standing up for what is right often comes with risks: social rejection, professional consequences, or even personal loss. This is why resilience is so crucial. Resilience doesn't mean being fearless. To means continuing to act in accordance with your values even when fear is present. To build resilience, focus on practices that strengthen your mental and emotional well-being. These might include mindfulness, meditation, journaling, or seeking guidance from mentors and entrusted friends. Surround yourself with a community of people who uplift and inspire you. Resilience is not something you build alone. It thrives in connection with others. But what happens when we fail? Because inevitably, there will be moments when fear or pressure gets the better of us, when we act in ways we later regret. This is where the concept of self-forgiveness becomes essential. Self-forgiveness is not about excusing harmful behavior, but about acknowledging your mistakes, taking responsible, and committing to do better. It's about understanding that failure is part of the human experience and that growth often comes from confronting our shortcomings. Reflect for a moment. Is there a time when you fell short of your own values? How did you respond to that failure? Did you learn from it, or did you let it define you? The ability to forgive yourself and others is one of the most powerful tools for breaking free from the cycles of harm perpetuated by the Lucifer effect. It allows you to move forward with clarity and purpose rather than being weighed down by guilt or resentment. Finally, let's return to the most profound insight of all: the interconnectedness of humanity. When we recognize that the line between good and evil runs through every human heart, we begin to see others and ourselves with greater compassion. This understanding doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does allow us to approach the world with empathy and a commitment to healing, rather than judgment. Think about the ripple effects of your actions. Every choice you make, no matter how small, sends waves out into the world. Will your actions contribute to division and harm, or will they bring people together and inspire hope? Imagine a world where each of us takes responsibility for our own choices, where we resist the forces that dehumanize and divide, and where we strive to create environments that nurture compassion and integrity. This is not an unattainable ideal. It's a reality we can build, one decision at a time. As we come to the end of this journey, let me leave you with one final challenge. Reflect on what you've learned today and ask yourself how you can apply it in your own life. How will you recognize and resist the forces that pull you away from your values? How will you contribute to a world where goodness prevails over darkness? The answers to these questions are not easy, but they're worth pursuing. Because in the end, the battle between good and evil is not fought on distant battlefields or in abstract theories. It's fought within each of us every single day. So the next time you face a moral choice, remember this: you have the power to choose. You have the power to resist, and you have the power to be a force for good in a world that desperately needs it. The question is, will you rise to the challenge? Thank you for looking.